Welcome to Taking the Higher Road. I'm Leah Shaver, President and CEO of the National Transportation Institute. Each week, we interview industry experts and thought leaders who bring their insights to the driver life cycle as we discuss the industry's greatest challenges, recruiting and retention of your valuable workforce. I'd like to thank and highlight the show's valuable sponsors. Their dedication and commitment to the industry and to this show is greatly appreciated. Today, I am looking forward to a discussion with someone whose work, dedication, and passion for our industry that I admire so much, Mark Colson, President and CEO of the Alabama Trucking Association. As a leader of a state association, Mark not only talks every day to the trucking community in his state about all of the issues affecting them and their day-to-day struggles and triumphs, but he also works tirelessly with lawmakers, regulators, and the industry's network of suppliers, vendors, and partners to help the fleets in his state and beyond build the best trucking industry possible for our drivers and for the goal of safely delivering freight each and every day. Mark, if you can't already tell, I am so glad you're here. Thanks for agreeing to chat with us on Taking the Higher Road.
Thank you, Leah. This is what an introduction. I'm honored to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
I will. I'll type it up and send it to you so that you can add it for
Be my new bio.
any future intros. Yes. Well, of course, I want to ask you about your background and how you made your way to trucking. But let's start on the topic that's near and dear to both of us and one that you've been hard at work on lately: workforce development. That takes a different shape in your state and in your work. And I do want to talk about how we reach younger generations to promote trucking opportunities. But to start, give us a quick overview of the workforce development projects that you're working on, why you find them to be so critical, and what this looks like in terms of interfacing with your member fleets at ATA and with the state government here.
Thank you, Leah. Workforce development means different things to different people. But, when I started with the Alabama Trucking Association 5 years ago, almost to date, as I talked to the best and brightest leaders in our industry, in our state, and around the country, the driver shortage, or we need more drivers. That was a thematic that came up, and obviously that's been around for a long time. And I'll let the economists debate whether we're 80,000 drivers short or whatever, but I think a premise that we all can agree to from every different part of the industry is we need high-quality people getting into high-quality training programs, getting into high-quality jobs, right? And we know in a state like Alabama, we get to work with all these high-quality companies, and we know they have these awesome people working for them. We know they have wonderful stories to tell, and we want to attract other people to it. But, when you ask the question, like I did 5 years ago, well, what do you think we should do about that person who's been a leader in the trucking industry? You get a lot of different answers, and because there's no silver bullet in workforce development. There's a limited number of people out there. All industries are competing for them. And, we've got to position the trucking industry at a higher plane. Somebody said, well, in Alabama, do you want to make for high school students? You're talking about attracting younger students. Do you want it to be their first pick coming out of high school? I said, I'd love to be in the top 10, and that's just the reality we face with the entry-level driver, both in Alabama and around the country, aged 38 years old. That's crazy. That's crazy, right? 20 years since somebody was 18, they thought, I'm going to do something. And then when they're 38, they were like, oh, now I'm going to try to drive a truck. And so that's changing, and there are a lot of positive things happening there, both from the industry standpoint, from individual companies that we talk to. But we still are it's an uphill battle. There's a demographic cliff that's coming that most people are aware of with the generation that's going to be coming out of high school over the next several years, one of the smaller populations. And so there's going to be a smaller group of people to compete for going forward throughout the workforce. Technology will help with that. But, when it came to us and our approach to workforce development, after having those conversations with the thought leaders, it was, what can we do to change the public image of trucking in Alabama? So what was birthed out of that was a campaign, the Careers in High Gear is what we called it initially. We're evolving that now, but initially it just was to take those, what we called the real faces of Alabama trucking, individual stories that we know, real people with real companies in Alabama, sharing their stories in a unique way to targeted audiences that we believed through research had a higher propensity to want to become a diesel tech or professional driver. Obviously, there are other career fields in trucking. We focused on those two for this effort. And what came out of that was we proved we can attract them with this messaging, and we can drive them to training programs. And we were able to do that through a partnership. We won the ATA's Mike Russell Public Image Award 2 years ago for that work. And And one other thing I'd like to mention in that space is just since I mentioned the high quality training programs, because I believe we have to add high quality to all these things. We don't just want more people in trucking, right? We want great people in trucking. And so one of the things that really frustrated me in Alabama alone, just through our community college system where we have a great partnership, there are 15, really now 15 plus commercial driver's license programs, CDL programs at community colleges all throughout the state, not to mention the private training offerings. There are 9 plus diesel technician training programs at community colleges. I found out that the instructors and program leaders in all those programs as a collective receive basically zero professional development support. Yet in every other sector of education, pre-K, elementary, high school, postgraduate, every sector, high school coaches, career coaches, elementary ed, special ed, all these educators have conferences they go to. They have collectives that support them. Yet we're 100 in Alabama. Trucking employs about 131,000 individuals, and we have 30 plus thousand trucking companies. And yet these are a large group of people who are supporting the workforce development for our industry. They're not getting the support that they need. So through a partnership with the community college system here, we've now gone 2 years in a row hosting a professional development conference for all of the program leaders for the diesel tech and CDL programs in the state. We had one in 23. We just executed one in 24. Huge success. And they embraced it. And my argument to the community college leaders, and they embrace this, just starting anything new is hard. But I said, selfishly, I just want one thing for the trucking industry out of this, is to look them in the face, the educators, the people that are in the classroom or in the truck, and tell them thank you and that we love you and we support you. Because how often, they're the boots on the ground, at least with a certain population of people that are coming into our industry and other industries. And I think it's our responsibility as an industry. Our membership has embraced that, and that's only going to get better and better and better each year. So the fruit of that labor will come. So those are just a couple of things I wanted to mention when you talk about workforce development.
Well, you've just validated for our audience and listeners why I invited you here onto the show. So thank you for that. And maybe to those educators, after you greet them with such praise, it might have to end with, "And what can we do for you? What do you need other than money, maybe?"
Well, we do that. And I've said to them is we want to be a good, strong partner. And a partnership in each of those programs looks different in each of those areas. Sometimes it's a need to connect with students, but most of them are pretty full. Some of them need to connect with local employers. Some of them need equipment. Of course, they all need money. We do grant support help, so it does look different, and we do follow up, and so do our members. So that's really important.
It sounds awesome, and it's yet another thing to admire about the great work you're doing in Alabama. I want to go to that conference next year and and give some valuable data to them to supply in terms of speaking points, but. You raised a great point in a conversation that we had previously. You mentioned that in a lot of states, the state and local government, like in those other states, the state and local government in Alabama work hard to bring in new industry, like, let's say, manufacturing plants. The incentives to woo those companies almost always includes money dedicated to workforce development so that the facilities have workers they need to operate. Kind of leans into the last statement that we were discussing. Trucking, though, sort of always present in the background, generally never accesses those types of incentives. So how do you navigate that issue in Alabama, and how can other states and state associations follow your lead? Maybe we touched on that with the instructors, but tell us if there's anything else.
Yeah, we've got to be seated at the right tables. And presently we are. Just in Alabama, as a quick update, our legislature and governor and all the elected leaders supported a workforce development package that is going to transform the way all the workforce boards, both at the state and local levels, are set up. It's going to transform our Department of Labor into the Department of Workforce. And so because Alabama has one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country, but we have one of the highest labor participation rates, lowest labor participation rates in the country, worst labor participation rates, meaning people that are eligible to work that aren't on unemployment benefit are working. And that's a problem for all of our industries. And so, yes, it is reality. In Alabama, we're blessed. Most people, as an example, we produce over 2 million automobiles yearly in Alabama, and our auto manufacturing sector is huge. We love those companies that that are recruited to Alabama because, I mean, the trucking moves all their inputs and outputs, right? I mean, it's a wonderful thing for trucking. One of the reasons Alabama is a top 10 trucking state. Yet I do find often it's not that we're out for the incentives that bring there, but we want a fair and equitable environment. A lot of the times that has to do with the tax and regulatory legal environment in the state. And, workforce development is a big component of that matrix that makes makes a state a good place to live and work and run a business and raise a family. But so that's been our argument here, is that whether it's a local workforce board or some of these statewide advisory boards, or when we're in recruiting companies here, we got to think of trucking as the essential link in the supply chain that it is, and not an afterthought. And that we have a lot of favor there in Alabama. I know some states it's a more difficult political battle, but I think it's just a constant fight that we have to remind those that we're not just a cost of doing business. We are an essential part of the supply chain, and we need to be thought of on the front end and the back end of these conversations. So we've had some success here, but I mean, it is. I know that my colleagues in other states fight those similar battles, and it's a constant every day. Got to remind people just how important the trucking industry and the people in it are to an economy being successful.
So true. We have to shift the workforce development conversation to the next generation. I serve on the board of directors of the Next Generation in Trucking Association, and you are an active member and big proponent of the work that we are doing. I have a few questions here around this. Why is it important for trucking companies, associations, supplier companies like NTI to be active and to support Next Gen? And how do they impact the broader goal of workforce development at the state level, even specific to you in your state of Alabama? And I wrote down before, you mentioned afterthought in regards to funding, but that's very similar talking point that you and I both share in regards to employee choice, selection of trucking as a first, maybe even second or third choice instead of an afterthought or after the fourth job or career option.
Well, first of all, Lindsay Trent and Next Gen Trucking Association is doing amazing work. The only organization that's fully focused on introducing career paths into trucking at the high school level, and others are doing great things, but that singular focus I think is so important, because I can't do that full time at our association. I can't just spend all of my time and our association's time introducing to high schools in Alabama opportunities in trucking, because we have to cover a broad space. So I'm so thankful that an organization exists, and like you said, we've been supportive since day one. And Lindsay came to Alabama recently, and she's been a big part of the success with the community colleges that I mentioned earlier. But with those companies, I mean, I think we've had some really great stories to tell in Alabama. So just two examples. One of our chairman of our foundation, who really helped inspire the work that we're doing at our Alabama Trucking Association in the workforce development and public image space, a guy named Terry Kilpatrick. He was president of Billy Barnes Enterprises from a rural part of our state. But he created the first state-sponsored apprenticeship program through our Office of Apprenticeship for commercial driving, for professional drivers. And it's a partnership with the local high schools and the community college in that area. And so the actual high school students have the ability to get their CDL if they're 18 in high school, and then get an apprenticeship with a local company. And it's been hard. It was hard to fall for. It was hard to set up. There was a lot of work there. But I mean, the fruits of that, again, a small company that are overcoming the insurance challenges that he has in hiring those entry-level drivers that are between 18 and 21. And so the apprenticeship program is helping with that. And then recently on the other side in Birmingham, Alabama, Southland International is a international dealer there, great company in our state. They created the first state-sponsored apprenticeship program for diesel technicians for high school students in partnership with Jefferson County Schools, which is where Birmingham, Alabama is, in Jefferson County. So when you see companies like that being innovative, you understand it takes a lot of work. It takes a commitment, but they understand the need to be able to share that story to a younger generation, to be able to show the awesome job opportunities that are available. Then that word of mouth to take place so that, so it's not an afterthought. So these are great jobs. I can make really good money. These are companies that take care of their people, and help them grow as a professional. And so, when I've been able to go through those experiences with companies like that, I get to see what can be done I get to see that it's hard work. I mean, it takes a commitment to it. It's not going to just happen naturally. It's got to be mutually beneficial. The company's got to be able to, it's got to be profitable to be able to do that. But those are two small companies that I know a lot of companies have done a lot of different things, but that is just one way that I believe this younger generation can be exposed to the really awesome opportunities that are available in trucking.
Well, building on those two examples and sticking with the topic of reaching the next generation, aka millennials and Gen Zers, and then Gen Alpha, the oldest of whom are entering high school now, outside of the work that Next Gen is doing and those two companies that you mentioned at the high school and community college level, let's talk about how companies individually in their own communities and we as organizations within trucking can better reach younger people to engage them in our industry. Historically, our industry has not been strong at promoting trucking to younger age groups. We often don't participate in career fairs at high schools because we can't really recruit them for a few years after until they turn 21. So that only perpetuates that gap that you referenced earlier, which, as you know, goes well beyond the age of 21 into the mid or late 30s. I'm also a big believer in participating in local parades, Hello Summer, networking with our friends and family about trucking, doing touch a truck events at schools, being able to dictate a career path. There are lots of ways that we can inspire. How do you work with your member companies on this and encourage them to take a more active role in their own backyards to build those bridges to younger generations?
Yeah, we do have a number of companies that participate in career fairs. I mean, and what I found is that we didn't have, so through Lindsay and Trenton, Next Gen Trucking Association actually, through a collaboration, helped create a careers presentation to actually be able to give, to students, whether it be a high school level. I've used it. My mom is a director of DHR. She's a social worker. She runs the DHR for a county in our state. And every year she takes the foster kids in their care through a career development experience, a career exploration experience. And so every year they'll bring a group to our office and we'll do a careers in trucking exploration event just at our office. And it's a wonderful way to, get in front of students, for us to stay sharp. And, what is that generation? How are they viewing the world? How do they communicate? And so a lot of companies do that, but, most areas of our state and most states have workforce development boards or through their school systems that host career exploration events. One of them I know is like Worlds of Work. Wow, they call them. That's in a bunch of states. There's different ones, and some school systems require their students to go through these career exploration events. So we got to make sure that trucking is a part of those. That's one critical way. I think another way is through career coaches. I don't know about other states, but in Alabama, every school system has at least one career coach. We need more. They're not just guidance counselors. These are individuals that are specifically designated to help students explore their career options coming out of high school. And we've got to make sure those career coaches are knowledgeable about the culture of the trucking industry, how wonderful it is, what the unique opportunities are, how to connect with training programs. So I think that's it. And I think third is just building a relationship with training programs in the area, even if that company doesn't primarily hire out of that training program. And I think demystifying our industry is part of this whole matrix, is that we need to do a better job of mapping where, especially for the professional drivers, where entry-level jobs are, like who hires them, even if it's they working for driving for a municipality, right? Let's help people find quality entry-level jobs if we are barred from hiring them, like our flatbed industry or our tank truck industry. They can't hire entry-level drivers and never probably will be able to. But we can still support places that are developing them well, right? And building partnerships with them. So I think that's another way. I think building a relationship with the training programs in your area to help improve their quality too, because they need your support to get better. You want them to be a high quality program, just like they want you to be a high quality employer. So I think those are three pretty specific ways people can engage.
They are, and I admire all of them. I do want to touch on the opportunities and just echo your plea. I mean, we talk about this, Lindsay and I, at least on a quarterly basis, how to make job opportunities for that next generation more visible to them. And I think the more that potential employees can see those opportunities, the more that employers might embrace the idea that if their peers are doing it, so can they. And then, of course, I'm a big fan of your mom and the work she does, but as a licensed foster care provider, I'm going to tell you, I have not considered. I do mentoring and working with teens in foster care, but have not considered sharing the career path opportunity in a more formal basis. So I'm going to take that idea and bring it to our agency. I think that's a great idea, and I love that you guys are doing it. It's a great way to partner, of course, with your mom too.
That's right.
Um,
My hero.
yeah. Well, there are a lot of naysayers in the industry, many of them in older generations, who complain that millennials and Gen Zers don't communicate well, that they don't have a great work ethic, that they're not excited about their jobs or the industry. They aren't willing, like prior generations, to roll up their sleeves and get the job done, keep their head down, and, all of the stereotypes that I'm getting at. With all of your outreach and exposure to workforce development initiatives, many of which specifically target these age groups, do you find yourself agreeing or disagreeing with those opinions? And obviously not as extreme as the way that I suggest them, but would those naysayers be pleasantly surprised at who millennials and Gen Z really are when they show up for work? Do they need lessons on focus and effort and qualities that our companies need in their people? Or do we need to get over ourselves and embrace the qualities that these younger generations do bring to the table? What are your thoughts on my very controversial question?
Well, I'm confident throughout history, every new generation has presented a challenge and opportunity with, assimilating into the workforce to some degree. I went to a small liberal arts college in Montgomery, Alabama called Huntington College. And one of my blessings of my life I serve on the board of trustees there now, which is just a wonderful experience to get behind the scenes of that college. And it's doing wonderful things in the lives of students. But several years ago, and I think they've had to pause it through COVID, but they hosted a program for emerging high school seniors in the summertime that were nominated through their local chamber of commerce to come. And I think the group would be about 20 or 30 students. And these are high achieving students, but not from like your blue chip schools. They're from like rural schools or suburban schools. And so they would be nominated and they would come in a room and then, they'd take them through like a several day leadership program where they get exposed to different industries, go see the governor and different things like that. Well, I had an opportunity to speak to them every year, and I was in this job, and every year I use it as like a focus group. I would ask them more questions. I didn't go there and just impart wisdom because I wanted to learn from them, right? To your point. It's about how they communicate. But so many interesting things came out of that over the 3 or 4 years we did that. And one of the things was my perspective was that I was just extremely hopeful about the future after spending time with this group of students from Main Street, Alabama, different pockets of our community, and how bright they were, how passionate they were, how empathetic they were. And so, being 20 plus years their senior, I mean, we were from a different, though I'm relatively young, I was from a much different generation and probably saw the world much differently than they did. And so I just tell you that long story to say, I'm extremely hopeful about the future. I mean, certainly there's challenges with, styles of people coming into the workforce. But, I really do believe we have a great opportunity. Every generation presents a new opportunity and we have to embrace it. And I think the people in companies, especially trainers, the people who have the ability to coach in life I know the people that coached me through sports and in other things I've been involved, leadership programs I've been involved in. I don't know that I have that skill set. Not everybody that does can be a great teacher, but I certainly, value those that are of a different generation that can find a way to coach, right? Because we all need coaching. And I loved a thing recently. I don't know if the Savannah Bananas, do you know this company? It is a baseball team, and they're very quirky. I listened to their CEO, the head guy there, do a podcast type thing. And he got asked one question is, how do you recruit players? And he had a lot of long answer to that. And then he got asked, which is a really good answer, by the way, which I won't get into. The second one was, how do you train, the players that come there, they are going to do all this quirky, dancing and singing and all this stuff. And he goes, well, first of all, I don't like the question. He said, I don't believe in training humans. You train a dog. Humans want to be mentored, coached, and educated. And I was like, you know what? Our industry needs to hear that. Because we talk about training a lot, and it's not in a negative light, but we should empower people. We should mentor them. We should educate them. We should coach them. And I think this generation responds even stronger to that. They just don't want to be told to sit there and listen and be trained. They want to be coached. They want to learn. They want to be engaged. They want to be engaged in something that, does something positive for the world. And gosh, trucking, there's no better place to come than trucking, right? What a wonderful story we have to tell, what we do for this country, what we do for the world. And so I think if we think about it in those terms and try to meet them halfway, I think there's a lot of opportunities there.
It's such a good point. I wrote an article recently for an association that I've spoken at many times, and essentially, to put it very simply, in terms of workers, we tend to look for that unicorn that's already had experience, that has more than a minimal baseline skill set and knowledge bank. But the other options are to grow our own, meaning start from youth on up, or to upskill folks that are already in maybe one area, and help them to develop into ours. But you do that, as you said, through coaching and mentoring, and not just giving them some instruction. So I like the idea. And frankly, only familiar with the bananas because of a trucking conference that was in Savannah, and there was an event there. So anyway, one more question on workforce development, and we'll move on. Ties more into office work and quote unquote white collar jobs at our trucking fleets. Motor carriers often aren't located within big metro areas with a huge pool of workers to pluck from, and often at career fairs and within supply chain programs at the college level. Non-fleet companies tend to be flashier and offer seemingly more exciting career opportunities than those that when the students are going to graduate. It makes it tough for trucking to compete for that talent as well. So how can we as an industry navigate the divide? How do we attract those candidates and keep them in our industry facing those challenges that I just talked about?
Yeah, I understand this question and challenge. I was just at the Auburn Supply Chain Conference. They're called their Fusion Conference, Auburn University, and University of Alabama has a wonderful supply chain program. I know Mississippi State, a lot of four-year colleges in our region have some wonderful programs, and that's the challenge, right? Is that they come out of there's the other industries that may seem sexier, but I think that's an important place to engage for fleets, especially on the supply chain side. Is those institutions that are developing that talent, they have programs that really can get on the front end. We've had some member companies. Buddy Moore Trucking is a big one. P&S Logistics, Greenbush Logistics, that have just taken a proactive approach to getting involved in those programs. So they're capturing those students at like the freshman level and getting interns out of there, and some of them exclusively hire out of there because of so trucking at that program has moved up the ranks because not just because people like trucking, but because companies have decided to take a proactive approach to engaging. So I think that's part of it. It's always going to be a challenge, I think, but especially for those that are in rural areas. But again, there's a great story to tell, and if you find the right student, because not everybody wants to live in a metropolitan area. A lot of people are from rural places, and they like that. The cost of living's lower. A lot easier to retain good people in those areas because there's not as many jobs you can jump from A to B to C. So I think engaging with some of those programs like that are essential to help shifting the narrative on trucking can be sexy too, right?
Well, the great take I got from what you shared about your member companies is that they're starting early, much like our plea that we want to be more active in the community. The companies that are, immersed in that supply chain program have started from the very beginning, not after those folks have been wined and dined by all the other organizations in the area. So it's a good hot tip from Alabama. Well, now that we covered all that, let's just reintroduce you to our listeners. Trucking isn't exactly in your blood, but you admired it early. Like so many of us, you found trucking and trucking found you, and now you're this amazing leader in our industry. You're vocal and passionate about the issues that affect us. You're a loud and effective advocate for our people, the drivers behind the wheel, the folks under the hood, and the crew in the office. You're approachable and visible at industry events across the country, especially in your own state. So give us a quick backstory as to how you found trucking and how you became such a passionate vocal leader for the industry.
Oh, thank you, Leah. I've often said to people that truly God has a sense of humor because I grew up changing truck tires in my family's tire business called Blowout Tire Company. It was in Maplesville, Alabama. We moved down the road a little bit when I was in high school, but my dad, it's near 70, he was in his 70s. He's still in the shop every day, working in the shop and running the business. His father-in-law, my grandfather, started that business in the 1950s. So while I wasn't directly in trucking, I certainly from the time I was in diapers was it was ingrained in me. Hard work, the culture of this industry, and so it's one of the reasons I was attracted to trucking. And I spent 13 years at our state chamber of commerce prior to coming to the Alabama Trucking Association in 2019. It's called the Business Council of Alabama, and that was a wonderful experience. I got to work with every industry in our state, small, medium, and large, every corner of our state, doing lots of different types of work, advocacy, research, policy development, political campaigns. But all of that prepared me well. But this is the only industry I would have come to work in. I didn't. This wasn't just a job for me. This is something that I felt like culturally I was attracted. Part of that was one thing, and I think you'll resemble this. With a little bit of a sports background, I love competition. I think competition is healthy and good, and I love how competitive this industry is. Yet it's also extremely collaborative. Competitors work together in a healthy way, and I'm sure there are some exceptions, but generally speaking, we come together as a team better than almost any other group, and it's not normal. I mean, in Alabama's that way, and I talk to my colleagues in other states, it's that way there. So that's one thing. People that are in this industry love it, and they're willing to fight for it, and that makes me love it even more, and it makes me want to fight for them every day. So it's an easy, and then once we've got diesel in our blood now, and or electricity now too, whatever. I mean, we could get into all those issues, but I mean, once you're in it, you're in it. So it's something I love.
Cool. Well, then give us your outlook. Give us the Mark Colson outlook. If with everything that you've accomplished in the 5 years at ATA, what would you say your next goals are personally, professionally for the association?
Well, we're going through evolution of the industry. I mean, mergers and acquisitions, technology, energy issues, the regulatory environment. You look at all these different things. We've been in a freight recession for some time now. The next 5 and 10 years are going to be interesting in trucking. And so, positioning as companies position themselves to be successful, our association has to position ourselves to meet their needs wherever they are. We've done that since 1938. We don't look like, today like we did in 1938. And I'm sure 10 years from now, we won't look like we do today. And so we have to be willing to evolve and meet those needs wherever they are. In the short term, I know we'll get into it, but the fights for workforce development, improving the public image, navigating this uncertain regulatory and political landscape that everybody finds ourselves in, and then finding ways to bring some sanity back to the legal climate, both in Alabama and around the country. That's enough. That for the short term, we've got plenty on our plate, and we're doing it. We have programs and strategies and a leadership team in place and our staff in place to go after each of those issues aggressively and continue providing safety training and regulatory guidance and workers' comp insurance. We sponsor a work comp fund here that's first in class in this country. And so finding all those type of opportunities to meet companies' needs where they are. And long term, I think the culturally, we're just going to be positioned we're going to evolve with the times, and we can't be static. We can't live in the past. We've got to aggressively meet our members' needs wherever they are, and that's going to, over the next 5 and 10 years, that's going to be an interesting process to be a part of.
Your association is such a great representation and microcosm of the industry as a whole. Thank you for all that you're doing. You have hundreds of member trucking companies ranging in size from a handful of trucks to very large carriers operating across the various segments of our industry. Your core membership is in the 50 to 200 truck range. I think that's pretty common across the industry. And then, of course, another slice of your membership are companies that support your state's trucking companies in various forms: insurers, dealerships, legal, finance, etc. I give our listeners that setup to ask you this: why do you recommend that companies join their state associations? What resources and support do they receive? What are the networking opportunities, workforce development initiatives, support from lobbying, regulatory aspects? Give us a quick elevator pitch as to why companies and fleets should join and participate in their state association.
Well, for motor carriers, ATRI, the American Transportation Research Institute, released a study last year that had a data set that showed that trucking companies that were members of their state trucking associations were statistically safer than those that were not. So, one, it's in their best interest because and you say, oh, well, are you just attracting the safe companies to be a part of your association? Not really when you look at the end of that research, but in the sense of it, the way I like to say that is the members of our association are setting a standard. They're the standard bearers for our industry that people aspire to be. And we want people to, drive the safest equipment and operate safely, not to check a box on a form, but because it's what they believe in. They want to get families home safely. They want to take care of the motoring public. And so really it's to be part of that culture. But people who invest in any organization or any cause or any product deserve a return on investment. So, I believe, our association, like my counterparts in other states, have a tremendous value proposition. And just for example, this year, I mean, the fight that we're engaged in on behalf of our members on lawsuit abuse reform and trying to find, like I said, bring some sanity to that. But also, there was an issue in our legislature where we were part of a group that brought a reform to property taxes in Alabama, where the annual valuations on those were going up every year, not because the tax was going up, but their assessment was going up in certain places where property values weren't increasing. But that's how they fund schools and other things. And it wasn't being done the right way. So we were able to reform that. And that was a direct savings to member companies, especially those larger property owners and them personally and their employees. And so just things like that on the advocacy side. And so I could go down the list. But the other thing I like to say when I talk about being part of an industry association, especially one like ours, is it's also a way to give back. When I talk to these leaders in our industry that run these successful companies, small, medium, and large, like you mentioned, trucking's been good to their families, even with all the struggles, but they want to give back. And so certain things that we do under the auspices of our organization is giving back for the industry and just solving problems. Recently, our ag commissioner, Rick Pate, called me one day a few months ago, and due to the droughts in Texas, and the wildfires in Texas, they had a severe hay shortage. We had cattlemen all from across Alabama willing to donate hundreds and hundreds of bales of hay, big round bales of hay, but they couldn't get them there. They couldn't move them. So through our foundation, we were able to call some member companies at a discounted rate. We put in $25,000. Texas Ag did 25 and Alabama Ag did. So we covered the freight without anybody's pocket. And we got them moved there in 2 weeks, almost 800 bales of hay. And so it was a tremendous thing. And the cows are literally starving. And so that's just one example of there are opportunities to give back to your industry, and you can do it through organizations like your state trucking association.
So true. I would be remiss if I did not ask you about our joint initiative that you and I developed a few years ago based on an idea that you had. We were both speakers at an industry event, and there were the I Love Truck insignias around the lobby and some of the rooms, and of course being handed out in pins to wear by a mutual friend. And you said something that struck me so much on your panel that you were speaking on. I approached you immediately afterward to see if we could do something with it. This is where I feel like this is where we met. You said, with all due respect, I do love trucks, but we should be wearing pins that say I love truckers. AKA, instead of pledging our love for an inanimate object, let's reroute that admiration to the actual people behind the wheel. So our creative team at NTI got to work and develop the I Love Truckers campaign, which has also become I Heart Truckers and We Heart Truckers. I give that background not only as a hint to our listeners to check out the campaign at ihearttruckers.com, which does offer all kinds of free resources to take part, but also as an inspiration for our motor carriers and others in the industry to find ways to demonstrate love to their people and to all of the amazing professional drivers. What are your thoughts on how our listeners and their team members can think outside of the box and use everyday action to focus on our fine professionals behind the wheel safely delivering every day?
Well, I can speak for myself, and it's probably something we often all forget to do on a daily basis. That's one of the easiest things in life to do, is to simply say thank you. And that hit me hard during COVID when a number of truck drivers that I would talk to, and I'd try to go up wherever I was and just say thank you and ask them about their story. But with John Lex, very famous truck driver that was an American Road Team captain, we lost him several years ago. But during that time, I got to meet John. And he was just telling me these unique stories of people coming up to him. And he's like, Mark, I've been driving 20, 30 years, something. I mean, a long career, good career. And he said, I would never have anybody come up and just say thank you. And man, it broke my heart, really. And And one of the things that inspired me with all that is, having been engaged and, when you look at these billboard attorneys and they're so good at objectifying our industry. They go after the objects, to your point, they objectify us. Our job in our industry is to humanize. So I would just say, as a response to your question, anytime we can say thank you to a trucker, do it. Anytime we can participate in any event that is celebrating the professional truck drivers, I say let's do it. I mean, like, for example, during during COVID, we had to cancel our national truck driving, our state truck driving competition, our truck driving championship. And I was not a proponent for doing that. I'm like, well, look, this is one of the main things we do to celebrate the individual drivers. And, we need to find a way. Now, it was a good decision that year. I get it. We had to do what we had to do. But I'm gonna fight with all my might to make everything we do here about the individuals. Even with people talk about autonomous trucks and all this, the role of the professional truck driver isn't going away, and in my opinion, only going to be enhanced as we move forward. And as I was talking about earlier, as the economy and the world evolves. And so, anything we can do, both as an individual, as a company, as an association, to spread that word, to show that love for the people in our business, especially the truck drivers, I'm for it. I mean, so
let's do it. That's one of your famous lines. Let's do it. And somebody has a good idea. Let's do it. We talked a lot about workforce development initiatives, and I know you're also actively working on some tort reform legislation within your state, which I want to ask you about in just a minute. What are your chief issues top of mind for your member companies right now? What do you hear from fleets as to their main concerns, and looking ahead at the coming year or 2 years? And how does ATA respond to what they hear from membership base? What do you hear from member companies, and how do you reply?
Sure. Yeah. So we actually survey our members through ATRI. We generate enough responses for the top issue survey that we get Alabama-specific data. And that mirrors a lot of ATRI's data on their top 10 issues. And I also like to look at their top 10 issues on what truck drivers are most concerned about. But from a company standpoint in Alabama, of course, it ebbs and flows with the economy. Right now, the economy and inflation is right at the top. Lawsuit abuse, you mentioned it, driver shortage, diesel technician shortage, truck parking is a big one, and I know that's a national issue. Alabama's not the worst state, but we have our challenges there. And so on literally all of those issues, we have strategic, you call it a strategic plan. I don't really like that word because strategic plans get put on a shelf. Strategic initiatives to address them, whether it be truck parking. I wish we could do more about inflation and the cost of things and the economy, but that one's a little outside our scope. But lawsuit abuse, the driver, and technician shortage, I've already mentioned that ad nauseum, but those are just a few. I mean, I could mention more. Safety, I wouldn't say, I think that's number one always. That doesn't, even if they don't think, oh, that's the number one on the list, to us, that's always number one, because if we're not striving to be the safest industry and the safest companies and promote that at every level, from a cultural standpoint, not just from a, we have to do this, then I think all those other issues fail. So a lot of our programming to our members is oriented towards how to be a safe and profitable fleet. So those are some of the top issues we hear. But right now, I would just say it's the economy. I mean, it's a tough environment out there. You know that with your listeners and NTI, the work that NTI does. So surviving is thriving right now. And so we want to be there for our members while they're surviving, so that when we thrive, we can help them do that too.
Good call. Tort reform time. Tell us what you're working on there and how you're setting up a framework in Alabama for other state associations to follow on this issue. And tied into it is also the workers' comp fund situation in Alabama, which, as you said, is very unique. It helps reduce exposure to trucking companies and the cost of expensive on-job injuries. Tell us about your interest and commitment to this program that your state uniquely offers.
Well, we're really proud. Our members in our industry helped spark a conversation on lawsuit abuse reform that hasn't happened in Alabama in 30 years. And that's too long, because during that time, too many things have gotten out of balance. A lot of other great states and leaders in great states, Brenda Neville in Iowa, Alex Miller down in Florida, many other states, they've led efforts or been a part of efforts to address many of those issues in their state. So that's given us great inspiration here. I know Louisiana had a great battle this year. So you see a lot of activity happening in that legal reform space in the states. But in Alabama, we've let it go too long without addressing it. And in the meantime, you hear about nuclear verdicts. They're terrible, but what we really have, both nationally and in Alabama and most states, was what I like to call a crisis of inflated settlements. That is a death by 1,000 cuts. And you see that in insurance rates, you see that in operational costs, you see it too much, and those don't go to trial, right? So what are the things that are driving inflating these litigation? So through all this effort, a bill was introduced this year in our legislature that was an omnibus bill that covered caps on non-economic damages, direct action claims, the medical financing companies that get involved and inflate the value of cases. And so it addressed many, many, many seatbelt admissibility, many different issues that trucking companies and your listeners would be all too familiar with. The political reality is whether you're in a purple, red, or blue state, the opposition is just as strong. And we're in a red state being Alabama. So lawmakers have to hear from trucking companies, but other industries. The bill was not specific to trucking. And so for lawmakers to truly understand that we've got to address these things, it's not about plaintiffs' lawyers play a role in life, but some of these issues have just gotten out of control and they need to be talked about. And we believe, what we put forward was aggressive yet reasonable, and looking forward to addressing that in the future. You listeners could go to www.lawsuitfairness4al.com to see a really great coalition of groups that were supportive of that effort that will support it going forward. So that will evolve and ebb and flow, but the good news is the conversation's been started and it's been way too long. So when it comes to our workers' comp fund, the ATA Comp Fund was started in the early 90s, really during a crisis moment, but it's evolved to become one of the leading workers' comp providers for trucking in the country. But not only in Alabama, we now have partnerships in, I think, 6 or 7 other states. I know Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Iowa, and Tennessee, and ride business in at least 46 states. So it's a way that, improves the safety culture of the companies that are part of that, because it's not just about writing your work comp check. It's about keeping your costs down, but keeping your claims down. But you do that by a behavioral-based model that from the top corner office to the shop floor and everything in between, everybody understands what the mission is, and that's to get everybody home safely. And when you do that, your costs go down, your claims go down, you get your annual premium back in droves. And so we've been proud to be able to offer that service. So the team that runs that here does a fantastic job. And so it has been a big part of creating that culture of safety that our industry is so proud of in Alabama.
Very cool. Also cool, going to end it on a light note. My last 2 questions. Have you approached the subject with your daughter about in what capacity she will be joining the trucking industry? And have you bought her the Lego truck set yet from Costco?
We haven't got done the Lego set, but she's got more trucks in her little playroom than you would imagine. But one of the cool things this year, she's just finished pre-K last week. But this past year on Community Helper Day, had the opportunity to go to her class, pre-K class for Community Helper Day, and I read other places you'll go, but then gave a little talk about the different types of trucks that are out there, and had little model trucks, and they all played with them and talked about the trucking industry too. Now you're talking about high school students. This is pre-K students, so I'm getting in there at the pre-K level. But that was a wonderful opportunity. And every time I see our members and see their children at our events, whether it be our conference or our truck driving championship or golf tournaments, whatever we do, I look at all these kids, mine too, and I just think, hashtags are everything. Like hashtag future trucker, and so I just see it floating above their head when they're running around. So no, we would be lucky to have someone as talented as her in the trucking industry.
Well, I look forward to watching her blossom in the industry. I'm excited about that. And I think you can get the Lego semi truck anywhere, like that Lego is sold, but it's like $35 or $40 less at Costco. So I have one in my office set aside for Malachi when he is old enough to start with that. At this point, it would just be material for me to walk on
Well,
and get upset.
I did have a experience walking away from the Bluey. If you know the show Bluey, the Bluey
Oh, I do.
Playhouse at Costco recently, that was an experience. So we escaped that, but I should have countered with the Lego truck. But I don't
Yes,
know if
yes.
Lego truck could have competed with Bluey that day.
Probably not, but next time. Mark, I want to thank you again for joining us and for giving us some insights and inspiration around all of the hard work that your association is doing on behalf of carriers, drivers, and the industry as a whole. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leah.
And thank you for joining us on another episode of Taking the Higher Road. Stay tuned for next week's show when Jeremy Raber returns to Taking the Higher Road for another fantastic conversation. Please know that your feedback is very important to us, and your kind reviews keep us on the hunt for more great talent to put in front of you. Remember to rate and review Taking the Higher Road on whatever platform you are using to listen. Once again, a special thanks to the sponsors of today's show and to Mark Colson. Until next time, thank you for taking the higher road.